The Most Valuable Player award is among the greatest regular season accolades for an individual player. In theory, the award recognizes an individual as the greatest player for a respective season, but the winner of the MVP award is not always obvious, and sometimes the voters get it wrong. But what does it mean to be the most valuable player? How is that different than being the best player in the league? And what role should team success play into the award? To explore this issue, let's look back at the 1989-1990 season, a season that featured arguably the closest MVP race in NBA history. The 1989-1990 NBA season was special. It marked the end and beginning of a decade, and featured the transition from the Magic Bird era to the Jordan era. Magic Johnson made his second-last NBA Finals appearance in the season prior, and Jordan would make his first Finals appearance against Magic a year later. And while the Detroit Pistons ended the NBA season with their second consecutive championship, they did not have a player finish in the top 10 in MVP voting. But even without a champion in the running, the MVP race was full of all-time greats. The top 10 in MVP voting that year featured 9 Hall of Famers. The Most Valuable Player award is difficult because it's not clearly defined. How do voters determine who is the most valuable player in the league? Can a player be more valuable than another player who is better than him? An examination of NBA history suggests that the criteria for MVP voters has changed. Some voting trends led to a recognized best player receiving the award over other players with superior statistical seasons. Other times, voters gave enormous weight to team success, effectively voting for the best player on the best team, regardless of individual stats from players on lesser teams. In other instances, the MVP award was given to the player with the most impressive statistical season, or a unique statistical achievement, with less emphasis on the team's record. And sometimes it's given to the player with the best narrative. The truth is, because the MVP does not have a set definition and is voted on by media members, each media member has unique opinions and experience, and there will always be biases and shifting standards when it comes to the MVP winner. But who was the best player in the NBA during the 1989-1990 season? Let's look at it from a statistical perspective. A player that deserves at least an honorable mention when it comes to the stat book is David Robinson. The Admiral finished that season with per-game averages of 24.3 points, 12 rebounds, 1.7 steals, and 3.9 blocks. And with that stat line, Robinson and the Spurs finished as the 2 seed in the Western Conference. That historical season from Robinson was enough for him to place just 6th in the MVP race. While David Robinson had an impressive statistical season, maybe looking at more advanced stats can show who the MVP was that year. According to Basketball Reference, win shares is a player statistic which attempts to divvy up credit for team success to the individuals on the team. While the stat is of course imperfect, the league leaders in win shares are almost always at the top of the MVP race. In the past 20 NBA seasons, the league leader in win shares has won the MVP award 11 times. And even when it's not the league leader that wins, the MVPs of those 20 seasons have finished top 4 in win shares 18 times. And even for those who don't win the award, a high win share almost guarantees some votes. The league leader in win shares placed in the top 3 in MVP voting 19 of the 20 seasons. For the 1989-1990 season, the league leader in win shares was Michael Jordan at 19. He was followed by Charles Barkley at 17.3. and then Magic Johnson at 16.5 win shares. Jordan had an incredible 1989-90 season. He had finished runner-up for the MVP award in the season prior, and won the award the year before that. MJ finished the 1990 season with per-game averages of 33.6 points, 6.9 rebounds, 6.3 assists, and 2.8 steals. He led the league in points for the 4th consecutive season, and he also led the league in steals, and he played in all 82 games that year. The Bulls were making improvements, and Scottie Pippen was developing, making his first All-Star team that season. But a common narrative around the league referred to Jordan's numbers as empty stats. There was a belief that the Bulls couldn't win with a player like Jordan, but in hindsight, it's difficult to argue that Michael Jordan was not the best player in the world at the time. And with the Bulls finishing the season with the second best record in the Eastern Conference, the MVP award could have easily been given to number 23. But that year, Jordan finished 3rd in MVP voting. In the 89-90 season, Charles Barkley was also one of the best players in the league. Barkley made the All-Star team for the fourth consecutive season that year and finished with an impressive 25.2 points per game on a massive 60% field goal percentage. He also recorded 11.5 rebounds per game, 3.9 assists per game, and 1.9 steals per game. The 26-year-old led the Sixers to a 53-29 record, an impressive improvement from the year prior. Barkley's historic season led him to receiving the most first-place MVP votes that year. But even as the leader in first-place votes, Barkley finished as the runner-up in the MVP race. Since the 1980-81 season, the NBA has selected media members, each of whom are given power to vote for that year's MVP award. Voters submit their selection of the top 5 candidates for the award, placing them in order from 1 to 5, each position having corresponding points. A first-place vote is worth 10 points, a second-place vote is worth 7 points, a third-place vote is worth 5 points, a fourth-place vote is worth 3 points, and a fifth-place vote is worth 1 point. The MVP award is then given to the player with the highest point total. In the 89-90 season, Magic Johnson received 11 fewer first-place votes than Charles Barkley, but his combined second through fifth-place votes won him the award. But let's be clear, Magic had an amazing season of his own. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar retired after the previous season, and this was the first year that Magic was playing without him. The Los Angeles Lakers finished the regular season with the best record in the league at 63-19, and Magic Johnson was their leader with per-game averages of 22.3 points, 6.6 rebounds, 11.5 assists, and 1.7 steals. And Johnson recorded 16.5 win shares, the third most in the league. Without clear guidelines or a specific formula, inconsistency is inevitable with the MVP award and its voting. But even with the swaying standards, there seems to be a few categories of voters that can be identified. While Magic had a great season, it's hard to argue that he was the best player in the league. But what is clear is that Magic Johnson was the best player on the best team, and the MVP being a regular season award means that the best team is the one with the best regular season record. It seems that voters seek to reward players who win, even if it takes away slightly from their statistics. This type of voting may seem old school, but even in the last 20 seasons, 13 MVP winners were on the 1-seed team, 3 MVP winners were on the 2-seed team, and 2 MVP winners were on the 3-seed team. One of the biggest examples of the MVP voting swaying this way is with the 2004-2005 award. That season was the first of back-to-back MVP awards for Steve Nash, and his first success was controversial. Nash narrowly beat out Shaquille O'Neal, who had a good case for the award, and Dirk Nowitzki, who came in third place that year, had a case as good as any statistically. But the thing that separated Steve Nash from the other competitors is that he was the engine behind the Phoenix Suns, the team that captured the best record in the league at 62-20. And while 15.5 points per game on efficient shooting and 11.5 assists per game is impressive, there's an argument that Steve Nash's first MVP award was the result of him leading his team to 62 wins rather than the stats he put up. But sometimes, the award is more complicated than giving a trophy to the best player on the best team. Back to the 89-90 MVP race, Barkley, who finished in second, totaled 38 first-place votes, that 38 being 11 more than Magic and 17 more than Jordan. The Sixers finished as the second seed in the East, but even as the third seed, the Bulls had a better record by 2 games. And with the team's success being so close, it's hard to argue that Barkley had a better statistical season than Jordan. They both had great offensive seasons. Jordan bested Barkley in points and assists. Barkley beat out Jordan in rebounds. But on overall impact, Jordan was surely greater. For example, his 2.8 steals only told part of the story behind his defensive impact. That year, MJ made the All-Defensive First Team and finished top 5 in the Defensive Player of the Year award. But as mentioned previously, Jordan had a lot of critics at the time. In the last 2 seasons and in the 1990 playoffs, Michael Jordan and the Bulls could not beat the Pistons. And many believe that the ball-dominant, high-scoring style of play Jordan displayed was not championship-style play, but Jordan's league-leading 19 win shares told a different story. However, what made Barkley's season viewed as MVP-worthy was that the 76ers' regular season accomplishments shattered the media's expectations, and Barkley was the obvious reason for their overachieving. The 76ers had the 14th best preseason odds at winning a championship, and they were projected to enter the postseason as the 8th seed. Charles Barkley essentially willed a mediocre team to the 2nd seed in the East, a feat arguably deserving of an MVP award. So did the right player win the 1990 MVP award? Magic, Barkley, and MJ all put in MVP-level regular seasons, and perhaps a close race was warranted, and who should really win depends on the criteria for the award. Magic wins the best player on the best team MVP, Barkley wins the narrative-based MVP award, and Jordan wins the best player in the league MVP award. Obviously, the most valuable player award has historical significance and follows NBA tradition, but it seems unclear exactly what the award is. One MVP voter defined it as the best player on the team with the best record, unless it's the star who has done something statistically and artistically masterful over the 82-game regular season canvas. Another MVP voter said, "It varies from season to season for me, but generally the impact that a player has on his team and on the season for that team means a lot to me, but there are always expectations that overtake the rule. Like many things in terms of voting, I judge by feel, and that feel can vary from example to example." It seems like the MVP criteria considers two main things: how much did a player win, and how great was their individual performance. The winning aspect has priority on the MVP scale, but the individual aspect is next in line. Do you think the MVP should be based on a specific set of criteria, or should there be an MVP formula? Or does the current ambiguity behind the award work? Who do you think should have won the 1990 MVP award? Let us know in the comments and subscribe. Thanks for watching Basketball Pantheon.